with Ruben Abati.
Hello, good afternoon. I hope you enjoyed very much those South African sounds, ending with Jerusalema by Master KG featuring Nozembo Sikode. Very much. There's another version featuring our own homeboy, Burna Boy. But let's get on with the business at hand. And as I welcome you to another edition of your number one talk show, City Talks with Ruben Abati, on your number one lifestyle station, City 105.1 FM. On this show, we talk about stories of political and human interest, issues that affect us all as citizens of Nigeria and that affect our daily lives. Today, we will be discussing at length topical issues, our society, the values of investigative journalism, restructuring, the lingering ASU strike, and latest developments, as we have been told. And to guide us through this today, we have a special guest who has a broad experience in journalism, in activism, and also in how to make Nigeria a better place. Please join me in welcoming Lanre Arogundade, the Executive Director of the International Press Center and former Chairman of the Nigerian Union of Journalists, Lagos branch. Lanre Arogundade is a professional journalist, an author, a trainer, a researcher, and a press freedom and media development advocate. He is from Ijebu-Jesha, Osun State, and like all of us, he lives here in Lagos. He's an alumnus of the University of Ife, now known as Obafemi Awolowo University. He was one time Secretary General of the Obafemi Awolowo University Students' Union. That was 1982 to 1983. And also later President, National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS, from 1984 to 1985. He was later the chairman, the Lagos State Union of Journalists, from 1995 to 1999. And is presently the Executive Director, International Press Center. He has been a columnist, reporter, editor, member, editorial board. His main forte is in the media and also in activism. If you want to be part of this conversation, you can call us on 0700 1051 1051 51. And you can leave comments on WhatsApp 09099164403 and on our social media accounts at City 1051 on Zoom, Twitter, and Facebook. Lanre Arogundade, good morning and thank you for joining us. I see you are in a party regalia. You have told me that there is a very important wedding today.
Ruben. I'm comradely in party regalia.
Yeah, and I can see,
I have to leave the church service of the wedding of my very good friend's daughter, Abisola. That's one of our colleagues, Ayo Alukolokum.
Yes, I know.
Because we can't abandon our responsibilities.
Yes, congratulations.
We're doing a lot, but I didn't want to turn you down the second time.
Thank you for joining us. But very quickly, let's start with the recent agitation again for restructuring in Nigeria. It's an old subject, but then young Nigerians went to the barricades and they said certain things are wrong with Nigeria. They came forward with 5 demands. And what we've been told is that those 5 demands are not necessarily about what is listed. That these demands are about good governance in Nigeria. And we have seen how that demand for good governance, how the protest became a major issue and the fallout of it. First of all, I'd like you to comment on the role of youth in the national development process. Was it legitimate for young people to come forward and say, this is how we want Nigeria to be? And did the government respond appropriately?
Well, I think it was right and correct for those young Nigerians to come forward and said, we want these kind of reforms in the place. We want the disbandment of SARS. and generally that they wanted good, governance. What they have done is historical in terms of, fulfilling the purpose of youth. And so even if we look back in history, incidentally, this happened in the very month when we were celebrating 60 years of Nigeria's independence. We need to remind Nigerians that those nationalists that fought for independence didn't fight for independence in old age. They deployed their youthful energy toward the fight for a better Nigeria. Anthony Nauro, as at the time he moved the motion for Nigeria's self-governance or independence, if you like, was a young person. The likes of Awolowo, Zeke, and so on. These were young Nigerians who went to school and came from the universities with a lot of, fervor to fight for a better Nigeria. After our independence in 1962, Nigeria was to sign the Anglo-Nigeria Defense Pact that would have made Nigeria more or less a military satellite of Britain. Again, it was a group of young Nigerians then organized under the West African Students Union, led by the likes of Alao Akaba Shorun, Komishola Oshobo, all late, very, very young people, that fought for that. So over time, it has always been the historical responsibility of youth. And I think that what Nigerian youth did with NSAS protest, especially this category of youth that we had tended to deride as a generation that was apolitical, that was not interested in serious issues. They were more committed to voting at BB Niger in their millions, that were more committed to wearing sag trousers, that were more or less like, you could say, more or less dismissive as an unserious generation, to the extent that, in fact, even the president at the stage said, they were lazy youths. So what they've done actually is to wake all of us up to our responsibility. I believe that those young people essentially spoke for the society. After all, it wasn't just young people that had been extrajudicially killed in Nigeria. Older people had killed. And to that extent, I think we need to be fair to them. Whatever shortcomings we might have noticed in that struggle. As I've repeatedly said, there are no perfect struggles. And any member of my generation that paints the picture that when we were there, we did everything right, hoodlums were not involved, I think that would be an historical lie. I was just 21 years old when I was president of National Association of Nigerian Students in 1984. Many of the leadership of that movement were also young people. And I recall we embarked on a boycott of classes to demand for non-increment of tuition fees in universities, to demand for free education at all levels, because the then Buhari Diagbon government had said that free education at all levels could not be funded. So we went on a national boycott of classes to press on for those demands. But youth, once you are in a struggle, you begin to enjoy it. And so midway into that struggle, when the art government said tuition fees will no longer be increased, we didn't call off, we just continued until a group of older comrades came around and said, hey, look, you guys, you've won something, you want to wait till when they declare free education, that's another struggle. So why don't you call off this strike at this stage or protest? And so after 11 days, we had to call it off. During June 12, we were asking people to stay at home at the level of campaign of democracy. I mean, that stay-at-home order affected a group of Nigerians who were earning their daily livings. Transporters were mobilized not to go on the roads. So don't let us make it look as if, in terms of struggle, our generation, we were angels. Every generation learns from its own historical experience. And I think that the first takeoff is to commend this group of young, Nigerians for waking up to their historical, responsibility. Ruben, in those days on campuses, one of our favorite quotes was that of Frantz Fanon. We used to say that, we used to quote Frantz Fanon as saying that every generation out of relative obscurity shall discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. I think this generation has not betrayed, their historical mission. They fulfilled it in their own way. And whatever shortcomings and failures we have is a reflection of other collective, failures in our society. So even if you look at the arson, the destruction that followed the protest, which we didn't like, but we can also put it in the context of an ill-equipped, police and an ill-trained, army, to the extent that 60 years after our independence, our police are not able to use, water cannons to disperse, protesters. The kind of hot water that when it's shot at you, more or less, it pushes you down. Our fire brigade, when there are some fires, how many fires have our brigade been able to quench? So we tend to put all our frustration on these youths and made it look as if they are the creators of hoodlums in our society. They are not, and we have to be fair to ourselves. Like I said, I condemn any form of anarchism. Interestingly, even when we were in university, we adopted the definition of Femi Osofison then. Femi Osofison wrote a brilliant article around 1980 or so, where he said that there were three categories of students. Those who would, think rationally, engage in intellectual discussion, and embark on action on that basis. Then he said there were those who would not be part of any of those rational discourse, but when they hear protest, their own is to go and destroy. And then they said the third category are the passive ones, who are not interested in anything happening in the environment, and they will not participate in any form of protest, whether peaceful or violent. And then they challenge us to belong to the first category. So in all our talks at the campus then, we used to say that please belong to this first category. So when you look at record of people like us, we've never been anarchists. We've never supported irrational, actions. But Oshofison's definition captures what happens in society. Anytime there's a protest. So if we now say hoodlums are hijacked, and then because of that we might not protest, we are going to be abolishing a major right of citizens, the right to speak out.
Well, but Lanre, thank you for the historical perspective that you have offered. But there was an aspect of your analysis that has to do with strategy and tactics. Will you say that the Nigerian youths of 2020 who went out there to protest, end SARS, end bad governance, no to end insecurity in the north, that they failed at the level of strategy and tactics? If you look at what you said about the fact that if the protest goes on for too long, some other forces could take over. Where do you think they went wrong? There was a protest in 2012 under the Jonathan administration. If you were to compare that to what happened in the first 2 weeks of November, and to compare that also to how young Nigerians and elderly Nigerians organized against the annulment of the June 12th struggle, where would you say, the organizers of this current protest went wrong, which allowed for what has now looked like a degeneration into, to borrow your word, anarchy?
Well, first, even those protests that you mentioned, June 12, 2012, youths were also active participants in those protests. Those protests were not dominated by elderly people, as it were. Even we that were talking, myself and yourself, we knew how old we were, in 2012. We're not in our 50s. So, and student activists, successive generations participated. So there's no really major struggle of Nigerian people that you have not had, young people, so to say. But in terms of, strategy, first, let me say that, I would want to think that these youths, reacted to their own environment. And I give you an example that people don't follow. You see, we have a lot of impunity going on. And if you go to campuses, for example, it has become a danger for you to want to emerge to lead students' unions. First, the authorities have become extremely intolerant of independent student unionism. And once a vice chancellor does not have a candidate in an election, or a student leader emerges that without the approval of the university authorities, they simply ban the students' union. They ban students' unions at Unilag, they ban at LASO repeatedly, and many other campuses. So the kind of freedom that we enjoyed, where we had ban of student unions then, but it was an extreme, it was an exception rather than as the rule. But now the rule is not to have independent unions. So vice chancellor will just pick their own people and then do whatever they like. I was speaking with a young journalist a couple of days ago who interviewed me, and she said that when she was in the University of Lagos, that the authorities did not allow them to have a say. That as a matter of fact, they were made to pay monies, all kind of indemnities, and so on. So this generation came from this background of realizing that leadership of struggles is more or less a criminal offense. So to that extent, they adopted this strategy that we now think is wrong of saying that they were leaderless. I don't accept that. Whatever the case may be, every struggle must have its leaders, must have its coordinating committees. You must be able to communicate. So essentially, it was a struggle that just was more or less, spontaneous, and that was going on. So in terms of strategy, I would think that this is where they probably got it wrong. And then the idea of we are not political. They were even resistant, and they're thinking that it was an age thing. So if anybody of my age appeared, or anybody said it was from a union, they said, no, we don't want anybody from union. They didn't allow a Ishowore, where I had opportunity to speak with the protesters, just to kind of let them understand that they should have a much more long-term perspective. Before they could listen to me, they viewed me with suspicion. And I had to say, well, I was NAS president, I was just 21 years old. As a young person, I had done what you were doing. And then they now became, receptive. But along the line, I feel that, they also more or less, began to realize some of these things. So it will have been good for them to have, coordinating committee, so that based on the government reaction, then that committee will be meeting regularly and then taking decisions, especially as to whether to suspend temporarily the strike and watch the situation and so on and so forth. But I don't think it is the shortcoming of their strategy that led to the kind of destruction that we had. And I might also say that a number of organizations that had experience in struggles of the working class, in struggles of the youth, like the youth rights, campaign of the Democratic Socialist Movement, intervened. And at a stage, you could then see some, attempts at qualitative leadership. So instead of having a leaderless situation, groups were now created, WhatsApp groups were created. So some level of discussion was already going on. And I think there was a qualitative improvement at a certain, stage. But just to say that we cannot attribute now the destruction that followed totally to this issue of the shortcoming of their strategy and tactics.
Which brings
so we have to put it in context. First, talks had been sponsored to attack these protesters, and they had resisted them before they turn around, which
brings me to my next point, Lanre.
Represented.
Which brings me to my next point. I mean, you are the executive director of an international press center. You have been chairman of the Nigerian Union of Journalists in Lagos, and you are, well, I know you guys don't like to be described as veteran journalists. I know many of our colleagues, they don't call me a veteran. I'm still a practicing journalist. You are still a practicing journalist. But one of the fallouts has been, look, media houses, particularly TV houses, being sanctioned by the NBC for claiming that there was a massacre at the Lekki toll gate on October 20. The government, through Alhaji Lai Mohammed, continues to insist that we cannot be talking of a phenomenon called massacre without bodies. Now, 3 TV stations were fined, and this week, the government has also had cause to engage CNN in what looks like an altercation. How do we know the truth? Do we have to rely just on the judicial panels of inquiry, or is there a role for the media through the vehicle of investigative journalism in helping society to determine the truth, particularly as there are issues here relating to fundamental human rights and the interaction between the state and the citizen?
Well, definitely there is a very, very strong role for the media to play. This is a matter of, in Lagos State, it's a matter of state interest. In Nigeria, it's a matter of national interest. And globally, it's a matter of international interest. So without prejudice to the work that the judicial panel that the Lagos State government set up is doing, which is a very welcome development, I feel that the reports that we have been having could be value added to the information that they might want to cross-check in the course of their work. The media is definitely part of governance, because Section 22 of the Constitution in Chapter 2 expressly obligates the media to monitor governance and hold government accountable to the people. So whatever the media is doing in relation to the Lekki incident would be in accordance with that mandate of holding government accountable. Because when you now talk of government, you're also talking of governmental institutions, the army, the police, the DSS, and the rest of them. So anything that the media is doing to help to unravel the mystery of Lekki, I think would be in accordance with that. And our appeal will be to the government to recognize this and create the enabling environment for the media to be able to do this so that it can help citizens understand, what is really, going on. Now, having said that, I must say that it's quite unfortunate that Ruben, the media in a sense is facing a double jeopardy as far as this crisis is concerned. Don't forget that media also suffered as a result of the destructions, the arson you talked about. The TVC was vandalized, attacked, and set on fire. The nation was, vandalized, attacked, and set on fire. AIT in Benin suffered the same fate. Not to talk of individual journalists that were molested, that were brutalized in the coverage of the elections. Now, having suffered that, we're also, suffering, other attacks in terms of our work. People calling us, to question. And I feel that is not how it should be. Now, how can the media help with investigative journalism? There are a number of information out there that are subject of contestation. The question of whether, live bullets were used, the question of whether the bullets used were capable of killing, people, the question of, the origin of, those, bullets, the question of whether after the army had left the scene, the police had come. When people put a lot of blame on the media and say the media did not get it, they also forget that we're also dealing with inconsistencies on the part of some of the institutions of the state. And in this particular instance, the army. The army first said soldiers were not at the scene. When evidence came from Amnesty International that they were there, then they said, yes, they were there, they didn't fire live, bullets. And then there are questions over that. And then there was also the question of, so many questions. And then at a stage, the Attorney General and Minister of Justice said those people that had uniforms of soldiers were probably hoodlums. So we have a lot of, so when you're talking of fake news or inconsistencies as far as this is concerned, it's not just for the media alone. Now, I know that you asked this question because of what CNN has done. But before CNN, Premium Times Nigeria has also done an investigation. They went to the scene, they pieced together information up to the discovery of a floating body on the lagoon, which they believed was one of those, killed as a result of the Lekki shootings, and spoke with residents of a shanty close to that place who gave a lot of, information as to what, transpired. And that is, I think Sahara Reporters also did, besides the fact that there were also Nigerian journalists that were present on the ground. People miss that point. NTA, Nigerian Television Authority, had a female reporter on the ground on the day of the incident, and she was reporting live the shootings that, gunshots were being fired, my crew are hiding somewhere, and so on and so forth. Now, people have said CNN didn't have a correspondent on the ground. What are they saying? You didn't have to. The nature of investigative journalism is that when something of public interest happens, it could be pipeline explosion. We journalists are not always there. Our duty now is to follow up and provide credible information. And I feel that they fulfill that purpose. I do not see what is wrong in what they've done. Now, you talked about Nigerian media calling what happened massacre, which some people believe was responsible for that, the level of violence that followed. I don't think that was necessarily the case. First, you had a situation whereby this thing went live. Because we are in the age of social media, I probably think that the authorities didn't realize the implication of what they were doing. That even though lights could be turned off and you could be firing gunshots, the level of technology now is that anything happening could be picked up, by satellite. So it was a live image that I feel enraged some group of people. I didn't say necessarily all those that went to destroy, but a lot of people were. So what we need to focus on was that the act of shooting, it was not necessary. And earlier on, I made a point that there are many ways by which law enforcement agencies deal with riots now as against firing of live bullets. We even have what they call rubber bullets, apart from the water cannon that I spoke about. As to the question of massacre, now in conflict-sensitive journalism, what we say, what we train and what we seek to practice is avoid giving figures to casualties. So for me, you could say a massacre, but what we don't want is when you now say 147 and so on. That would not, be professional, because we have not been in a position to actually, count the number of bodies. But to the extent that evidence has emerged that 1, 2, 3, 4 people have been killed, for me as a person, and this has become subject of debate, I could call it a massacre. I mean, Ruben, you are a literary person. I've gone through various definitions, and I've seen definitions of, Merriam-Webster, where it defines massacre in 2 ways. Talks about, killing as an act of cruelty, killing of a number of people. He didn't say killing of 100, 200, 300. And then he said a wanton, murder. And in some cases, it refers to slaughter of animals. So I believe that 2, 3, 4 people could actually be massacred if the process of their killing represents an act of cruelty against people that are, defenseless, that are choiceless. And in Lekki, we didn't hear of those youths resisting the army, throwing stones at the army, trying to attack the army with cutlasses or even maybe with guns. So essentially, they were peaceful protests. So when you shoot at peaceful protesters and it leads to killing, it is an act of massacre. Now, again, but Ruben, I also need to say this. Now, when you fire live bullets, we also have to talk about what is the intention. Lawyers, when they go to court, talk about committing murder and intent to commit murder. And so it's not every time that when you fire live bullets.
And mens rea. Actus reus and mens rea.
So on June 7, 1981, at the University of Ife, I'll just give this example. We embarked on a funeral procession because a student had been beheaded. And nobody knew why he was beheaded. His name was Bukola Arogundade. And it caused a lot of shock on campus. And at a stage, the Students' Union under Femi Kuku decided that we were going to stage a funeral procession to town. Apparently, some people had gone to wrongly inform the then KBAC, the owner of Ife, that we were going to pick the body at the mortuary and take it to the Oba's palace. And Obas were not supposed to see that body. But that was not the case. But to cut the long story short, at Lagere Junction, and I was right there, the police decided that they were no longer going to allow the procession and said we should go back. We refused, we defied. Again, like I was saying, no perfect struggles. You may say, what was wrong with us then? Why should we defy, They were armed and we said, no, we're going to continue. So they began to fire live bullets and tear gas. And there was panic, there was stampede. At the end of which 4 other students lay dead. It was raining that day. So what the police first did was to gather those 4 bodies and put their bodies on close to an electric pole and announced that they were electrocuted. And so ASU then now decided to set up an administrative panel of inquiry made up of Chief Ganifa Emi and late Ganifa Emi and late veteran journalist Labanji Bolaji. Younger generations won't know him, but he was a great columnist for Daily Sketch in those days. So that's what the 2-man panel that established the fact that those 4 died as a result of being trampled upon from injuries from tear gas canisters and from asphyxiation because they inhaled a lot of tear gas bullets. So bullet wounds were not found on those 4. But that didn't mean that the police there were not culpable. So the bullet wounds would not be, lack of bullet wounds cannot absolve the Nigerian army of culpability in the injuries, in the killings that happened, at Lekki.
Well, but the Nigerian army and the federal government continue to insist that no live bullets were fired and that there were no dead bodies at Lekki toll gate. And that's the main issue that Nigerians and the international community are dealing with. But I would like to ask you, one of the fallouts of this is the federal government through, again, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, saying that there is now concrete justification for the need to regulate the social media, not to ban it, but to regulate it. And that will only be done after consultation with the critical stakeholders, the Union of Journalists, and also the Nigerian Guild of Editors, and other bodies within the media and civil society. What's your take on that?
Well, To the extent that the minister says there will be consultation with critical stakeholders, I would say that it's okay by me. What we don't want is government thinking that it alone understands the issues and then can take a decision. Because social media has many dimensions to it. It's a channel or tool of dissemination of information by the conventional media. As we are doing this program, we're using Zoom. This is a conventional media, a radio station, making use of an online channel to run this kind of a program. So it's of a matter of interest to us as media. And like I said, we have this obligation to monitor governance. So we're interested in seeing that no regulation would curtail our capability to do this. We're also interested in seeing that no regulation would lead to a situation whereby we are barred from using what we call user generated content, and that even where we use such, we should not be held liable, because we're in the age now where in the course of broadcast we have eyewitnesses. Some television stations will pause, take live photographs from people, and we have seen a situation whereby the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission, for example, is already sanctioning stations for doing that. In fact, in the amended code, they make it a criminal offense to use such a user-generated content. Now, apart from the media, civil society organizations will also be interested in ensuring that no regulation curtails the right of freedom of expression in the online environment, because of what it means to them for citizens to be able to say this is what is happening in our area and we want it to be expressed. And I believe also that businesses too will be interested in how regulation does not affect them, because businesses use social media for adverts. They use social media for a lot of things. And as a matter of fact, when people complain about social media, sometimes they don't even talk about the nuisance that some of these adverts constitute, because you are just doing your chat and then these adverts keep coming. So it will be good to have these kind of stakeholders engagement. But what the government must recognize is that social media is a tool of development, and any undue regulation or a regulation that will curtail some of the rights that I've enumerated will definitely not be accepted. And that was why we opposed the social media bill that is before the National Assembly, and the other one that seeks to create the Hate Speech Commission, as well as the Nigerian the National Broadcasting Act, under which the NBC enforces the code. In fact, that act is so dangerous that it allows the minister to give directive to the Director General of NBC to move against media if, in the opinion of that media of the minister, that media has heard. In the social media bill, we have similar provision where it says that if, in the opinion of the commission, that is the hate speech one, that if it's in the opinion, so we're dealing with people who can just sit down and form an opinion that you have what you have is fake news, what you have is hate speech, and then they move against you. It's a collective responsibility, and we need to weigh the advantages and disadvantages of social media for this. But at the level of the media, let us use this opportunity to say that in our own regulatory frameworks, we frown at fake news and we go against hate speech. In the Nigeria Media Code of Election Coverage is very well there, and in other codes where, in fact, we have gone to the level of training our colleagues, journalists and other media professionals on how to verify fake news and encouraging them to be careful. I would advise government to use the instrumentality of the National Orientation Agency to embark on massive enlightenment of our citizens on how they should use social media. Don't share things that you are not sure of the source. Don't share things that contain hateful words. Define those ones. Let us embark on collective education, because it's not every time that forceful regulation necessarily resolves problems.
Lanre, before we throw the lines open to allow our listeners to also make their contributions and ask you one or two questions, I'd like you to comment on the ASU strike that has gone on for 9 months. In fact, yesterday we understand that there is some development that may resolve the the crisis. But at the same time, the National Association of Law Students, represented by a certain Blessing, has gone to court to say they are asking for 10 billion naira as a compensation for the disruption, the violation of the right of law students to education. Because when you lock down the university for 9 months, then of course certain persons will suffer collateral damages. And they are suing the Minister of Labor and Employment, the Attorney General of Federation, ASU. Do you think this is a good strategy? And do you think there is actually any light at the end of the tunnel with regard to the ASU strike?
Well, I don't think it's a good strategy on the part of the law students. When I read that, I was wondering. I said, this should not be the case. I feel that as law students, they could also use their platform to intervene and engage. But then it's within the realm of their fundamental human rights to go to court to seek to enforce their rights. And we can.
They are suing under Section 18 of Chapter
18.
2 of the Constitution, which, if I understand correctly, is not justiciable.
Well, that's why I said it's left to the court, because my own understanding is that the whole of Section 2 of the Constitution is what lawyers say is not justiciable. You actually cannot go to court to enforce those provisions. Although one of the constitutional amendments we are seeking is that all those rights provided for in Chapter 2 of the Constitution, the right to decent housing, the right to education, the right to, should be made justiciable. Citizens should be able to go to court to enforce that right. And if that happens, it would also benefit us in the media, so that we can also go to court to enforce our rights to monitor governance when we are obstructed, from doing our work. But let's see how that pans out. But in terms of ASU strike, it's quite frustrating. And even as an activist myself, I've had cause to say, can't there be any other strategy that ASU could adopt instead of these strikes? Because when you are waging a struggle, you are mindful of public opinion, and to that extent, the opinion too is not really that favorable. People feel that this drags too long, but I don't think it would be right to blame ASU entirely, because we're talking of fulfillment of agreement voluntarily reached with this organization by government. And the question we should be asking ourselves is why is it that successive governments are always failing to respect this agreement? Now, if you sign an agreement and you have problems implementing parts of it, you do not wait for a strike to call the other side, to call for a review, to open the books and reach some agreement. With our educational system has really, really gone down, and we need to do everything possible to save it, especially at the level of brain drain. It's the same thing that is also affecting the health sector. We keep losing our best. And for me, it is not the best. So I would think that it is government that should try to bend, backward and look at what they can do, to meet the lecturers, halfway. I think this is the time to invoke what we call doctrine of necessity. So you might have
thing in the Nigerian Constitution.
There's no doctrine in Nigeria.
There's nothing called doctrine of necessity in the Nigerian
Constitution. Well,
it was just a convenient invention.
But if we now have some hope that government and ASU are reaching some agreement, that would be very much welcome. But what I want ASU to do, and I'm saying this, is that going forward, the ASU too, it shouldn't be government alone that ASU would always confront when it comes to the issue of funding. I always tell our comrades in ASU, I support their struggles, I support their strike, but I think they also need to do more about accountability within the university system itself. It is not only federal government monies that come into the universities. Monies come from other sources. And quite frankly, I would believe that there are questionable matters as to how these resources, are managed. The amount of money that the universities make from other sources. So ASU too, because I believe that ASU will be winning more trust, more public confidence, if they also take up these institutions at the level of ensuring that there is proper accountability for all monies that come, for them. But we need to support ASU, even as we advise them to always look at the interest of parents, and students. But more importantly, to let the government know that this is a wound that has festered for too long, and there is the need, to put a halt to the trend where you reach an agreement and you willfully violate that agreement.
Okay, Lanre Arogundade, at this point, let's bring in our listeners who will also have their own viewpoints on the issues you have raised. And you can call us if you've been listening to us. Our guest is Lanre Arogundade, Executive Director of International Press Center, former chairman of the Lagos State Union of Journalists, 1995 to 1999. And the number to call is 0700 1051 1051. On WhatsApp, we can be reached at 09091 64403. We have our first caller on the line. Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Your name, your location, and your comment or question.
Okay. Mr. Arogundade, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes. My comment is on the role of the press recently. You just gave us a plethora of your activities in those heydays. The question I want to ask, where are those press that were so vibrant, so authoritative under Jonathan? We saw screaming headlines almost on daily basis, and it made this man to walk. It kept Jonathan on his toes. Some of the actions he wanted to take, because the press were against it, the man had to think twice. We saw it. All of a sudden, even the Save Nigerian group, everybody has gone underground. Is it because of political sentiment or what? Or those press people and those human rights activists, they have all left the country? Because if this were normal, we wouldn't have gotten to this stage. If the people who are supposed to be the watchdog of the society were playing their role, I am 100% sure that we will not get to this stage. That is why press entities like CNN is not doing your job. They are doing your job. This same CNN, remember, it was CNN that captured what happened at Turkey when Khashoggi was killed, a member of your colleague. This same press people, Anas in Ghana, brought down the whole Ghana judiciary. One man, I am asking, where are our own press people? Nigerian press, where are you? That is my question.
Okay, Lanre Arogundade, before you respond to that, hold on.
Yeah.
Before you respond. On
Okay.
Zoom, I can see Abiodun, I can see Mary Agidi, I can see Kolawole, I can see Mrs. Rose D. Thank you all for joining us. There are more people also on Zoom. But let's take another call before we come back to you, Lanre Arogundade. Who is on the line? Okay. Well, okay. There's somebody on Twitter. He says, "Hi, Dr. Ruben Abati. First, this current regime still thinks that the solution to every nail is an hammer. It needs to stop these dictatorial tendencies and show true leadership, as we saw in the 1960 Independence Bill of Rights, to regionally restructure a new Nigeria to something that worked in the past." Signed, Benito. Well, okay, that's via phone, but it looks like we have another caller on the line. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, please. Your location, and please be brief.
My location is before Ogun State. Before local government Ogun State. Are you listening?
Yes, I can hear you. From me for local government. What's your name?
My name is Elizabeth.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, please, I want to use this medium to tell the doctor to emphasize on the fact that the Nigerian youth, as we
On the volume of your radio, there's an echo
are you
here.
hearing?
Yeah,
Are
please
you
just
hearing?
turn down the volume of your radio so that we can hear you in the studio.
Okay. When we, the older ones, were born, there was nothing like computer. But these days, the youth are born into computer age. And I want to believe that the youth knows what they are doing. And in fact, we've been keeping quiet. With the older ones, we've been keeping quiet for long. And now these children, even in your house, you will see that the children you have now, they want this, they know their rights, they want this. So we should guide them well. Because when they see people fainting in the house because of concerns about money, the House of Assembly, they are fainting, and then we turn again and see them, they are saying, Honorable Minister, off your mic, and all those things. It's not a good example at all to them. So Nigeria should sit up, our leaders should sit up and know that the children we are bringing up now are no longer the older generation. They are the future generation. And so these children need to be taught aright so that they will be able to there will be a country called Nigeria in 100 years to come. Because the way I am seeing, every youth wants to check out. Oh, since they don't allow us to do this, we want to check out. So they should be talked to so that the Nigeria will exist in the coming year, 100 years, please. That's just my own contribution.
Okay. Thank you, madam. Well, Lanre Arogundade, will come back to you. 3 issues. The media that, the first caller says has become complacent. The issue about restructuring raised by the second person. And then the madam that just spoke now from E4 local government area about the responsibility of leadership. And they need to give young people hope.
Yeah, start from the last one. I thank the madam for calling. I agree with you that we need to do a lot to encourage the youth. We have a questioning generation. We have a generation that is informed in its own way, and we need to harness those potentials. And we saw elements of it in this NSAS protest, especially at Lekki, where the youth were showing us how to use technology, using technology to raise money and doing a lot of things. This is where government should go in terms of tapping into this creativity of our young people. Now, on the question of the restructuring, I believe that this will be subject of another long debate. I agree that what we call Nigeria was a contraption that was imposed without any democratic discussion among the peoples as to what kind of country that they want. So I believe that we should democratically negotiate the unity of Nigeria. Let us know the type of legal system that favors us and the way forward. But that can only be done if we have a form of sovereign assembly that brings together, elected representatives of the people. And such could also look at previous conferences that have been done. But to think of restructuring in terms of returning to the old regions or replicating what we had before, I do not think that might necessarily be a solution. Because don't forget that even when we had 3 regions, the Western region, the Eastern region, and the Northern region, there were agitations for creation of other regions by the minorities. The Middle Belt wanted its region, the Calabar Ugoja wanted its region, and the Midwestern region. And in 1962, when the Tafawa Balewa government created the Midwestern region, it was more to weaken the political base of Awolowo. So even within those bigger entities then, there were agitations by minorities. And so thinking that we can go back to that, I do not think that might represent the way forward. But there is a need for us to discuss the kind of country that we want. Who would argue that our problem, who like me, has to do with the kind of the socio-economic system that we run, the capitalist system, let's have an alternative. There are those who would argue that the presidential system is too expensive. Why don't we try the parliamentary system where all ministers are elected and the cost of governance is not as much as this? Now, the question as to where is the vibrant media of the past that shook the military? You spoke passionately. I agree with you that yes, in a sense, we might say that kind of media, we don't have it. But that time we had a common enemy, which was the military. But now we're in a civilian dispensation and interests are varied. Politicians own, the media. So we still have vibrant media, but they may not be all encompassing as we used to have it. And what we say is that where we have those media that are trying to ensure that government is accountable, we citizens also need to support that media. There are still journalists doing investigative journalism, even at the risk to their lives. Some of them have faced crisis in recent times, the likes of Isaiah Oshoyombo. And if you look at the data of journalists that are attacked, that are assaulted, so it's not as if the Nigerian journalists or the media has completely surrendered. You recall the case, sir, of Agbaja Lingo, who reported a story about the mismanaged fund in Cross River State. And the next thing was he was arrested, he was detained, and he was slammed with a charge of terrorism. So part of the problem we face now is that even when we try to do the little we can, our government, reacts dictatorially, like that man said in that Twitter chat that Dr. Abati read to us, and they throw us into jail and say we are terrorists. Or sometimes they use some laws like the Cybercrime Act to intimidate journalists. So the repression itself is so much, and much as we look at the shortcomings of the media now, we must also understand that we are dealing with a very, very repressive atmosphere, and we've had to be, fighting this. This year alone,
well, Lanre,
not less than 51 journalists have been assaulted, abused in the course of their work, and we even have a number of unresolved killings of journalists. But I accept your challenge. We need to do more to win the confidence of the public, so that the public can in turn believe in the media.
well, Lanre, as some kind of response to what you just said, we have Uwade Olaoluwa on Twitter, tweeting from at Olaolu Uwade1. And he says the media has a great role to play in getting the court truth with regard to Lekki carnage. He's not even using the word massacre. He says carnage. But he adds, it is unfortunate, he says.
Now for us, what is a carnage?
But he then says it is unfortunate that some of these media practitioners do compromise professionalism for vested interests. You may want to respond to that, but before then, we're rounding up. We'll just take one more call from... hello, good afternoon, or good morning still.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Emmanuel, calling from Shegute.
Okay, please be brief.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that Nigeria problem, I'm a youth. Love this country. That's what happened that make it so good. I really don't sit in this country. I can't really imagine a country that I belong to, and we are suffering from our leader. Killing his own children and all the leaders of tomorrow. I don't know how to put it. The way this country is really going is getting out of hand. And I'm opportune. If they're opportune, I will say we should let them keep on killing every one of us.
Well, Lanre Arogundade, two issues there.
I didn't really. Did you hear him?
Well, I mean, the second the caller was saying the way things are going in this country, things are getting out of hand, and he's saying, "Well, let them just kill all of us so that we know that."
No.
But Uwade Olaoluwa was raising the question that journalists are also at fault because they are not professional enough, and that they pursue vested interests.
I won't deny that. I won't deny that. With that, some of our colleagues are compromised, but that compromise has to do with so many factors. We try our best to encourage our colleagues. Let us leave the bar, because for me it's so important to have public confidence. Because if we don't have that, then we are losing both ways. So that when we come under attack, nobody wants to speak for us. They say, "Oh, don't mind those journalists. They've all been bought." I also get the same, accusations sometimes, and I say, "Well, we're there. We are trying our best, but it's not a very bad situation." I feel that the Nigerian media, continues to do its best against all the odds, that we face. But if there are those who feel that our best is not enough, I don't quarrel with you. We need to do more. We need to do more in the area of professionalism. We need to do more in the area of ethics. Our professional bodies need to do more. So that's why we keep saying that. One of the things we say, for example, is we call on our professional bodies, stop giving awards to governors, especially when they are still serving, because all these things tend to make people feel that we've totally, been bought over. So within, we are also fighting some of these battles.
We have just a few more minutes to manage, and I see there's a caller on the line. That will be the last call. Thank you very much. Yes, your name, your location. Hello? Hello? Well, we lost that caller. So on that note, we would like to thank you very much, Lanre Arogundade, and I apologize for dragging you out of Ayo Aluko Olokun daughter's wedding. So our best wishes to Ayo Aluko Olokun, our dear colleague, as he gives out his daughter in marriage. Thank you very much. And our hope on this program is that Nigeria will continue to progress and all our problems will be able to address them. We also want to thank all our callers and those who reach out to us on Zoom, Twitter, and Facebook. Remember, the conversation does not end here. You can reach out to me on my social media account at Abati 1990, both on Instagram and Twitter. And don't forget to tune in next week at 12 noon for another exciting edition of City Talks. My name is Ruben Abati. The show was produced by Adedoja Allen, Abiodun Odunton, Ayodamola Oludara, Oluwaseun Adetitun, and Olanrewaju Onipede Jr. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Next week is another day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Lanre. Enjoy the wedding. All the best.
With Ruben Abati.